All right, what's going on, everybody? It's like we are rolling here, and I wanted to talk a little bit about what the electoral map would look like if Canada actually became the 51st state of the United States. But I wanted to do so because obviously for Canada to get integrated, it would take some amount of years. So the map we're actually going to be looking at is reflective of what would be the 2030 census as opposed to what the election just was, which was based off the 2020 census. So a number of states' electoral votes are going to change, as you see here. Florida goes up, Texas goes up, Arizona, Utah, Idaho, Georgia, North Carolina, and Tennessee go up, whereas California goes down, Minnesota, Illinois, Pennsylvania, New York, and Rhode Island come down. So I'm just going to fill out temporarily the map, what it looked like in the 2024 election, Trump and Kamala Harris, just to use sort of as a frame of reference for right now. You had Kamala Harris obviously performing well up here. I couldn't separate the electoral votes for Maine in this map, so that'll be 4 that's going to Kamala Harris for this, but same thing for Nebraska. So 5 would be going to Trump, so it evens out. So if we fill in the states there that Kamala Harris won, and then we fill in the states that Trump won. Moment here. Okay, so what you see there is 324 for the Republican, 214 for the Democrat in the 2024 election, which would leave 81 total electoral votes based off the provinces. So let me explain that further. So obviously, there's swing states that could change, but we're just going to use this as the basis. And like I said, it's the 2030 census. So there are different electoral votes than it was this past election, which is why you see a greater number in the Republican column than Trump actually won on. So really, there's 2 scenarios if we're going to talk about Canada becoming the 51st state. And neither really are particularly good for Republicans. Let's just do the first scenario because that's the easier one, which is, let's say Canada becomes a state, just a state, just the entirety of Canada becomes a state. Well, it would probably come out to around 81 electoral votes altogether. And so, what you'd be looking at there is all of these being filled in for the Democrat based off what we know about Canadian politics. It would go Democrat entirely. And so there you see that the margin would close significantly. I mean, that's 81 electoral votes, which would bring the margins to 324 for the Republican, 295 for the Democrat. That's assuming that the Republican wins all of the swing states that Trump won this past election. But watch what happens when we get rid of all of the swing states. Right? Those were the 7 big swing states that Trump won, but I'm going to say that New Hampshire is also going to be a swing state, Virginia, Minnesota, and New Mexico. So let's just say right now, and New Jersey as well has moved into the swing state. So looking at that, we'll say these are the floors for the Democrats and Republicans if Canada was entered in as a state, just the entirety of it was one state. What you'd see is a significant increase in the floor for Democrats because it'd be a reliably Democrat state. And so, what otherwise would have been a huge advantage for Republicans, right, if we get rid of all of Canada here, um, and we watch the margins, well, basically, what do we see? We see the floors, the absolute floors for each party heavily favors the Republican side, right? 229 to 165. That already is a over 60 point electoral advantage. It's very problematic map for Democrats, or a very concerning map for Democrats. Now, whoops, I accidentally clicked Maine. So, 229 to 169. So exactly 60 electoral votes. And so, what you're saying to yourself is, okay, best case scenario for Democrats is maybe we can expect that Virginia, New Jersey, New Hampshire, Minnesota, and New Mexico go their way. Well, even if all those go their way and we just focus on the 7 swing states, Republicans still have a base advantage of two. I mean, we're just talking about the safe Republican states right now. We're not talking about likely or lean or anything else. These are safe Republican states, and it brings them to 229. Obviously, we know to win a presidential election currently, you need 270. So it's a very favorable map for Republicans. And based off the electoral changes, it's even better, right? Florida goes up, Tennessee goes up, Texas goes up in electoral votes, whereas in Democrat states, California comes down, New York comes down, Illinois comes down, Minnesota comes down, Oregon comes down. So really the updated census in 2030 would be really bad for Democrats, that you're almost exclusively losing Democrat electoral votes and gaining Republican ones. So Democrats would have to perform better in the swing states. That, let's just see here, let's just do some experiments. If let's say Democrats won the Rust Belt, well, that would have, the Rust Belt, and we'll say Georgia. That pushes them over 270. But let's say they don't get Georgia, but maybe they get Nevada. That's still not at 270. And in 2024, the Rust Belt would have been enough to hit 270 for the Democrat, but because of the electoral vote changes, they need one more, and it can't be Nevada. They'd be looking at having to flip a North Carolina or Georgia. So at the very least, Democrats would need 4 of the main 7 swing states that they talked about during the 2024 cycle. It need 4 of them, and one of them not being Nevada. So that's a huge bar to cross, especially when we see, Arizona and Nevada in particular moving to the right, but Pennsylvania is moving to the right too. And I think Pennsylvania will become more of a reliably red state. And I also think, and this is just my estimation, that Michigan will as well. I think North Carolina and Wisconsin and Georgia will really be the swing states next election. But let's just give those to the Democrat candidate for right now. So now you're looking at 280 to 258. That presently would be a election victory for the Republican. But we bring in Canada, and if Canada comes in as one monolith state, watch what happens. It all of a sudden doesn't even become close, right? 339 to 280 if Canada is a monolith. But Canada is so big, and I think having one state, the 81 electoral votes, would not fly. And it doesn't really fly in Canada anyway. They're divided up into provinces, as you can see here, right? So the second alternative to Canada just coming in as one monolith state would be all of the individual provinces act sort of as their own state. And so, you know, they all act as their own state with the designated electoral votes based off population, right? Well, let's go into the Canada the 2021 election results. Now, you know, the US relative to international politics is actually very conservative as it is. Like even the left, the sort of mainstream Democrats in the U.S. are still more right than you know a lot of other countries out there. Canada, in particular, is very left, and so basically, what we're looking at here is four part. I mean, we're looking at the five parties: Green, New Democrat, Bloc, Quebecois, Conservative, and Liberal. Right. The only party of those five that would even be close to being reliably Republican is Conservative, and you can't even be sure that um, that they would be totally reliably Republican. But for this hypothetical, let's assume that they are. Well, we will be look at the Canadian results here, and basically what you find is um, that Republicans, the Conservative Party, really is only looking at Alberta, Saskatchewan. Maybe you give them British Columbia, and this sector here. I mean, we know that the southwest of Canada tends to be more conservative, right? But let's come into the map here and take a look at this. So basically, let's be generous and give them British Columbia here, and Alberta and Saskatchewan, right? So that's about 19 total uh, electoral votes out of the possible 81 that Canada would presumably supply, right? So, the British Columbia area would be around 8. The Alberta area would be around 7, and the Saskatchewan would be 3. What is this there? So let's give Republicans that. Right there, that's not enough to win. But if we look at the 2021 Canadian election, those are really the only reliable ones, maybe with the exception of if we come in over here. And maybe we give this to Republicans, right? And that's another 4. Still, that's not enough to get there. And again, we're being generous here in giving Republicans these areas. So let's continue to be generous and say, well, this might go Republican as well. I don't think it will, because it moves into here where obviously you see a lot of liberal support. But let's just give that to them. They still have not reached the threshold to win this election. And obviously, these other places would not be going Republican. None of these other places would be. You can see right here, Bloc Quebecois is left, way left of the Republican Party in the U.S. New Democrat, obviously, and then Liberal, obviously. And so, you have this chunk here of possible conservative voters. I don't think that's enough to flip because that's the Quebec area, or sorry, the Ontario area. And I really don't think that or no, it is the Quebec area. Sorry. Um, but anyway, the point being is there's not a lot of conservative support here, and so this is best case scenario if we were to divide the provinces up into states, like to act as individual states. What we find is that the map all of a sudden becomes extremely favorable for Democrats. This is best case scenario for Republicans right now. If they had the updated census with Canada being divided up into provinces, Republicans would be at a huge disadvantage. They lose the election in a best case scenario, right? But it's more likely that this would be Democrat. This would be swing, maybe. This would be swing, maybe. And then Republicans are having to work with just these two as reliably Republican areas. But okay, so let's take out the swing states again for the U.S. And we'll just do the 7 swing states, even though I think Arizona and Nevada are going right, and New Jersey and New Hampshire are swing states as well. But let's just go with the 7 that were talked about here. So Republicans again would have to run the board of the swing states in order for Canada to not really make the election competitive. So even if you give the British Columbia area there and then the Nova Scotia area to Democrats, Republicans still have to run the board on the swing states. And how likely is that? Well, obviously that's up to interpretation. There's swing states. So if anybody knew which way they were going to go, they wouldn't be swing states. Per my estimation, though, I think that it looks like this. I think Pennsylvania and Michigan, because the Republicans are becoming more of the working class party, are starting to affiliate themselves more with that in this Rust Belt area, Pennsylvania and Michigan, you'll see a consolidation for the Republican Party there. With the improvements with the Hispanics and other demographics, Arizona and Nevada will become reliably Republican states as well. That these 3, I think, will be a toss-up. I think Democrats will continue to make gains in the South, and I think you could see a flip of Georgia. I think Wisconsin will always just be a toss-up. I think North Carolina will be a toss-up because of gains Democrats continue to make. But let's just leave those 2 as toss-ups for right now. Well, if those 2 are toss-ups, Democrats have the advantage, and they only need to win 1 of those 2 to win the election. And if we give Republicans this, it's still up in the air. It comes down to like Wisconsin as a state. But again, we're talking about best case scenarios here for Republicans. I think that these swing states will still be competitive. But this best case scenario for Republicans, that if Canada is divided up into provinces and each of the provinces is considered its own state, the Canada map here is best case scenario right now. The way you see it right here is best case scenario for Republicans. But it's more like this is a toss-up and this is a toss-up. But, if we're being generous with Canada anyway, that's best case scenario for Republicans in the U.S., just given what we know about how far left Canada is and how far left all of their parties are. Because liberal, every party here besides conservative really would easily vote Democrat, would be reliably Democrat. And even the conservatives might, be more in line with like a Nikki Haley kind of conservative, And there's no guarantee that if you put up a more Trump associated or MAGA candidate like a Vance or Ramaswamy or something like that, there's no guarantee that those Nikki Haley voters would come over there. And so I think this would probably go Democrat, and this would probably go Democrat. And so again, it comes down to the swing states, and Republicans would have to run the board with the swing states in the United States to maintain their lead. And I think that is a tough gamble. You know, you saw how much Trump was in all these states. He was doing 2 rallies a day in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, and he didn't even win Wisconsin by 1%, right? He won it by less than 1%, and Pennsylvania was closer to Michigan was closer to 2% or 1.5, 2%, but he really wasn't winning these by big margins, and he was in there every day doing a rally, right? And you had favorable circumstances for Republicans. And so I think, you know, Trump is talking about integrating Canada into the US. Best case scenario, um, he's putting the map in danger for Republicans when right now they have a a very strong position on the electoral map. And certainly, if Canada were to come in as a monolith, it would be a reliably Democrat um, property. And you're looking at, again, Republicans having to run up the board in the swing states in order to win that election. And so, I think uh, there is sort of one third possibility, which I think is perhaps the most unlikely one, but you never know, which is that in Canada, the assimilation into the US is viewed positively by people. Like the perception of that changes, and it's actually viewed positively, but the numbers don't really show that, right? Like the polling they've done on that, it's really only this southwest area um, that you see any kind of popularity for that prospect. Everywhere else, you really don't. And these are numbers being done as Trudeau, the liberal, uh, candidate or prime minister, former prime minister, because he's stepping down. Um, Even with his very low popularity ratings, so much so that he's getting booted out essentially or pressured to resign. Um, Even with that the popularity numbers for an assimilation into the U.S. Of Canada is a relatively unpopular position. And again, we're talking about the 2030 census, which shows improvements for Republicans in the states, but those improvements could be lost. At 2028, that census isn't going to kick in, so it will be the same map as 2024. And so, like I said, best case scenario is looks something like this. If Canada were to be assimilated, that each province is considered sort of its own state, and this is what it would look like. Canada comes in as a monolith. It's going to be easily go Democrat, and reliably Democrat. And that would be a total, approximately, in estimation, of 81 electoral votes. And you're looking at a Republican having to run up the swing states in order to push that over and win that election. So I think, in conclusion, an assimilation of Canada into the U.S. Would be extremely favorable for Democrats. I think Trump has to know that. And it'd be setting up the electoral map to be very difficult for Republicans to win. And it would be interesting, but I think that overall it would favor Democrats significantly and make it very difficult for Republicans to win at the federal level. So that's my take on if Canada were to become the 51st state, or at least part of the US. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree, or what you might think about Trump trying to make Canada part of the United States. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this analysis and content. And certainly let me know if there's any videos you specifically want to see. So I'll see you next time.